Hello, everyone, and it's like I am very delighted to welcome you to the second conversation in a series which is devoted to the quest of cultural responses that can work towards repair of the political and ecological crises today. Today's discussion will center around more than human potentials and possible potential for reparative solutions through collaboration beyond human subjectivity. And I am thrilled to introduce our wonderful guest who will be joining us in this conversation today. Anna Kuzmanić, it's from Slovakia, an artist whose practice is based on research and collaboration. Anna employs a wide range of media to examine the tension between the individual and society, politics and poetics, and seeks potential for change. Anna is a member of the international artist collective Eastern Serve and works as an associate professor at the University of Split. Jedrzejewska-Szmek. Krysia is a visual artist and biologist from Poland, whose practice is research-based and inspired by science with a focus on interspecies relationships and critical plant studies. Krysia works across different media, including site-sensitive installations, photography, video, and performative lectures. And she is also a member of the Kole group. Tery Žeželj from Croatia is a dramaturg that holds a bachelor's degree in dramaturgy and contemporary performing arts from the Academy of Theatre, Radio, Film and Television in Ljubljana, and a master's degree in contemporary theatre, dance and dramaturgy from the University of Utrecht. And Tery finished the program with master thesis, More Than Human Practices, Feminist and Environmental Potentials of Working with More Than Humans. And currently Tery has a 2-year research on multi-species landscapes on the possibilities for reconceptualizing the relationship with the environment. And today, the conversation will be moderated by Olga Roszkowska. Olga is an artist, filmmaker and researchers from Poland who explores issues in space of extractivism and nature colonization. She is involved in collective practice as a part of the Kole also and co-founder of Krzak Collective. She teaches at Royal Academy of Arts in The Hague, and Olga's work is rooted in fieldwork and employs embodied practice, audiovisual exploration, creative writing, and material play. Her work is informed by collaborations in environmental anthropology, research, as well as those formed in resistance and climate movements. It's a great pleasure to have you here. And I would like also to mention that today's event is taking place within the framework of the European project entitled Testing Ground, Reparative Practices for a New Cultural Ecosystem, supported by the European Union and developed and conducted by Kurziv, a platform for matters of cultures, media and society from Žeželj, Krytyka Polityczna from Warsaw, and Maska from Ljubljana. I will now turn the floor over to Olga to start the conversation. Thank you and enjoy.
Thank you, Ola. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to see people joining our conversation. My name is Olga, and I'll be sort of asking some questions to our lovely guests. And I just wanted to do a minute of housekeeping before we start. This conversation is going to last for about an hour. And after that hour, we're going to have another about half an hour for any questions or comments that may arise. And for those, I would ask you to either type them into the chat box and I can read them out loud, or if you prefer, just do the raise hand gesture here on Zoom. And then if you prefer to ask the question or give a comment directly, I just wanted to say that we're not going to interrupt the conversation for this first hour, just to focus on what our guests want to share with us, and then it's, you know, whatever happens. But before we actually start, I wanted to propose a little exercise or a visualization, because today's conversation is going to be really rooted and situated in specific environments that our guests work in, and to help us all, you know, get our feet on the ground, I guess, I wanted to propose this little exercise first. And for everyone to be comfortable, please turn your cameras off. You can also turn your sounds off if it's on. I'm actually going to do the same. So there's going to be just my voice for these couple of minutes. And first, I just wanted for you to have a minute to take a couple of really nice, pleasant breaths to sort of leave out everything maybe that happened during your day, and just for a second to breathe really freely, no rules, just enjoy it. And closing your eyes might help for this next couple of minutes. So with your eyes closed and breathing comfortably, I wanted for you to listen into the most immediate sounds around you, to connect to the space you are in, whether you're at home or at your workplace or anywhere else. Just listen to anything that might be going on. And now I wanted to ask you to think about a place that you connect to, maybe a place of your practice, a place where you work, an environment with which you work. And imagine the distance that maybe separates you from that space, as if you were moving from where you are to that environment, just to realize the distance we have, and to maybe in our head cover this distance to move to that space. Maybe it would be a quick walk or a long trip. And maybe it will make it easier for you to imagine a detail or one particular spot. And you can start imagining all of the little things that you can remember about that spot or that place. Just to make that image in your head a little bit more specific. And think about how this place looks this time of the year. What is going on there? And most of all, what could you hear if you were there? Is there a sound in particular, or is it more a sound environment? And if it's hard for you to remember those sounds specifically, maybe for a moment longer you can focus on another detail felt by another sense. Maybe there is a particular smell or color or texture pleasant to touch. And just try to give it all the details possible to imagine it and to situate yourself there. And once you're there, again, just take a couple of comfortable, pleasant breaths. And once you've enjoyed this moment, and whenever you're ready, you can start opening your eyes. Don't rush that. Do it slowly. And when you feel comfortable back in the space that you are, you can turn your camera on. I'm turning mine on, and I'll be waiting here for you. All right. So hello again, Anna, Krystyna, and Tery. We're gonna now start. I hope that this moment that we just had can make us refer a bit more directly to the spaces and the environments that we work within. Because the first question that I wanted to ask each one of you, I'm also seeing as a sort of expanded, extensive introduction to your practices. And because of today's theme, because of those multi-species, more than human collaborations, I really would like to hear how do you sort of introduce your practice? How do you look at it through the life network or environment, ecosystem, space that you work with? How is it situated there? What does it mean for you to have you know, to work in a way that is maybe more site specific than not. And I'm really curious about what types of relationships are involved in your work, and how do you look at them, how do you define them, how do you maybe give them a new shape, or, you know, maybe there are new words to be found, because probably each one of you deals with very different beings. And, you know, we might talk about non-human animals, we might talk about plants or fungi or weather forces or water bodies or whatever else, really. So yeah, so I would really, this is also something that I really hoped for this conversation, to keep it quite practical, or quite like localized and grounded in space. So I hope that's okay. And Anna, could I ask for you to start? Is that okay?
Of course. Thank
Okay,
you.
lovely.
Really nice introduction to make us relax. When I talk about my practice, it's usually research based, and it's very based in context. So first, what I do is try to research different aspects, different level of the context, or through the going to archive and reading about it, or go to a specific site, explore it, but by you know, all sense we have, or to before I mostly work with communities of people, so that's mean I work with the people, I make conversation, dialogues, and certain. But recently I did few projects which wasn't based on human connections, but more about other species. So I technically have the same approach. Yeah, I just explore, you know, through literature, or through type to other senses, or just walking around and watching, you know, and observing things, and then try to find as many informations I have. And then, of course, during the project, this developed in more artistic way, but that's kind of how I collect dots of informations, which I bring in storytelling later on. Yeah. I hope that's answered the question. No.
I just wanted to maybe ask a follow-up question. What types of non-humans were you working with?
I did with plants recently, but yeah, it's kind of still very. It's more about city and landscape in the city, and like wild growth of the plants. So I was exploring just the area where I live. I don't know if you want that I go deep in the project now or later on, but
yeah, I think it would be nice to hear a little bit about it.
It's called the wild growth. So what I did, I explored abandoned land sites in my neighborhood, which was somewhere in between demolition and building new buildings. Yeah, so I find around more than 100 different species, and later on I spoke with biologists and learned about it. I find out that most of them are not native, that they, like biologists call it, foreign, or even how you call it,
Invasive.
Invasive, yeah, invasive. But then with this, what I found, I shift to the area of more social kind of thing. I actually took archive of neighborhood of this area where I live, which actually very nicely documented modernization, so building of the roads, expansion of the city, factories, houses, and etc. So I make kind of mixture of collage which have 3 layers. One is a herbarium of those plants I find. But this time I use this herbarium as a kind of scientific language in which I put like documents for this modernization of the city, and I also merge it with the photos of the sites where I collect those plants, and those sites in the meantime was completely demolished because they was preparing for new buildings. So actually they killed all what was there in this 6 months period while I was doing on the project. Yeah, so basically at the beginning I was just walking around and exploring those sites where you have plants which actually grow completely widely without attention of the humans. Of course, the history of the seeds and the history of the us and migrations are connect, you know, but not always in a way that we are aware of it. Yeah. So those plants I find are mostly not from here, which is really nicely explained. All area, because that area expand with building of factories, and they brings lots of workers from all around. So I think the history of those plants, wild plants, and the history of developing of the cities in a way are very merged, you know, although we don't see the clear connection in a way.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Krysia, would you please share with us?
Thank you. Yeah, so maybe just to start with, I will introduce more the site where we work, then maybe the practice that will be easier to kind of grasp if we know more about the place. And I think yeah, our practice is very, very deeply situated in this specific place. So that's always a beginning of the conversation about what we do. And so our group, Zakole, is working with a urban wetland, which used to be a former river bend of the Vistula River. And it's maintained its humidity and its mostly its humidity throughout the development of the city, and it at some point it began to be cut off through from the river itself, and then it became surrounded by the city. But before that, it was just the agricultural land that kind of started to be overgrown by the city all around. The city developed in a very dense way, but Zakole maintained to stay there even though the urban pressure was very high. And it used to be used as agricultural land and pasture land. And then when capitalism entered Poland, and the agricultural practice changed a lot, it became neglected and abandoned by humans, which gave space for the spontaneous rewildering and regeneration of the place. And yeah, when we are talking about regeneration, I think we have to talk about beavers when we talk about Zakole Wawerskie, because they are very important actors in the rewildering of the place. Because with the with the end of agriculture in the city, at the same time, beavers started to regenerate, and their population started to grow after many years of being nearly extinct in Poland. So from the 80s, the population started growing and they started migrating throughout the country, and they also reached Zakole Wawerskie, where they started to build their dams and inhabit the space. And the main result was making Zakole even more wet, even more wetland type, and very much wild, because it was even more inaccessible to human beings. So this as a kind of introduction to what we do. I don't know if you want me to go on to our practice now, or just to.
I think so. I think just a little bit, and a little disclaimer, I guess. I'm also a part of the collect group, which we didn't mention, so that's why I'm smiling. Yeah, maybe just a little bit about, I guess, the practice or the relationship that we developed to the space, or yeah.
I think our practice mostly is based on being present there in different forms, and researching the place, researching and building relationships with Zakole. So from one side, is this very practical activist work of taking care of the place, and following all the things that are happening, and the question of future of Zakole under the pressure of the city. And because I didn't mention that there's still a threat of losing Zakole as a wetland, and it's an ongoing discussion in Warsaw. So this is kind of one direction of our practice, and it's very important for us. But the other is, since all of us have a background in art, we come from an artistic background, so we work a lot with artistic tools, but we try to use both artistic and scientific tools to kind of map and understand what this ecosystem is, and what are the relationships and the entanglements around it. So I think being present is just like the core and the beginning of everything. And what we the activity we mostly do is organizing walks, and it's something that we have been developing from the beginning, and it became kind of our main focus. But around the walks that are a kind of experimental, performative workshop in space, but around that we have several community activities, and also meetings and reading groups, and I don't know, several different activities that are all around all around being present at Zakole. I don't know, that was a bit maybe blurry, but I hope that's fine.
It's great. We're gonna expand further in the next questions, but I think it's great for now. Tery, can we at last jump to you?
Of course. Hi again. My name is Tery, and I'm currently getting very fascinated by the community of bodies that's moving inevitably with me. So, like by all the bacteria, viruses, and fungi, and all the elements that are making this body, or making life possible in this body. And most of those relationships I'm not able to perceive. I also am not able to articulate, and don't have a lot of knowledge, like verbal knowledge at least, but my body does. So that's something that fascinates me lately. And I'm more at the beginning of that because I started a research with Bunker Zavod in Ljubljana last year. And I was living in the Netherlands at that time, and now I moved back to Slovenia. So I was actually very struggling a lot with the situatedness because most of the iterations were happening here while I was living in the Netherlands. So the research was more on kind of attending multi-speciesness, or kind of like developing this multi-species lens for the environment than working with specific areas.
I guess your space or your area is, you know, in a different scale because it's your own body is sort of the landscape for the smaller things that happen, right?
Yeah.
I think that actually this is a good point on which we can move on to the second question, and maybe Tery, we can stay with you if you don't mind. Because in the second question, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into sort of the complexity of working with, you know, beings that we do not share the same language with, that we don't necessarily have the same sense of scale or time with. And I think that there is going to be a big contrast between what you're speaking about and what Anna and Krytyka are speaking about, but that's great. So, you know, we have different temporalities, we have different sort of spatial awareness, we have different languages. Also, I think in working with those, you know, non-human or more than human actors, we have to be ready for a lot of unpredictability and a lot of things that are going to remain unknown. So I just wanted to sort of ask you, how do you deal with it, and what kind of knowledge do you source from, and how do you, you know, search for your sources of knowledge, and how also you produce quote unquote, but how do you make knowledge and about things that we are very limited in comprehending, and you know, even our bodily devices are very limited in comprehending. So I guess that's the question for you all, but I think it would be nice to start with you, Tery.
Maybe a first thing to say is that till now I was kind of researching and working more in the area of kind of navigating the attention to the unseen and unperceivable. So that was a lot of kind of like creating the experiences or trying to make like experientially some things possible, but also playing a lot with speculation and imagination in that sense. So it was more on narrating or navigating the attention and broadening the awareness for the relationships we are already part of or that are already existing, but I am ignorant to them and I'm unaware of, or I don't perceive them. And in that sense, it's still a question for me too, how to kind of navigate this attention to them without simplifying those things or without kind of tending to like making the unknown knowable or master it and, you know, kind of like devise it into effect. Because as you had in questions, I'm also very interested in for this unknowability and to kind of also leave this unknowability unknown, because I also have a conversation with my friend a lot of times and I feel there's a lot of tendencies to know everything, to see everything, to eat everything, you know, kind of to just consume everything. And it's still a very present question for me too, how to open up for this unknowability without tending to make it knowable. And in that terms, maybe more for opening processes for kind of like for other agencies, and maybe more cultivating the responsibility, like the response more than generating something and waiting for others to respond to. I don't know. I was now. Maybe
that's great. I'm a little curious about, you know, an example or something or an image that I could, you know, connect this thought to, but I don't know if you wanna give an example maybe of an observation, or or yeah, as you say, directing attention to something, what kind of things, maybe a little bit more specifically, just for us to have a little
maybe
more.
at the beginning of the last year, with Bunker, we opened kind of an archive or a platform where we chose a patch of a park, and we just invited, we were dealing with like the landscape literacy kind of was the question, and we invited everyone to go and observe this patch and just describe it like in a text verbally, and then send it to us. And that was kind of like trying to just put the attention to a super small space, like maybe 2 square meters, and just observe it. And because I realized that I don't know how to kind of describe it, or you can play a lot with the way of describing, but then also with putting a close attention to it, you notice much more, and that kind of influences how you continue with observation then later.
Yeah, I think that's great, and it's also a great segue to Krysia, who already turned on the mic.
Yeah.
This feels very close to home, I guess.
Yeah, it does. But even before the observation of the small patch, I guess I could. I was thinking that it's really funny or interesting how I can relate to the mapping of the unknown and letting go of the unknown that you are talking about, even though the scales that we work with are so different. Because I think we deal with that a lot, and I think Žeželj as a very intense and a very diverse and a very dynamic ecosystem is also always still, after 3 years of working and researching this place, a kind of mystery, I think I can say to me. And there's a lot of things that I think that they are ungraspable, and that's good, and that's something that is that kind of is located in maybe the tacit knowledge about this place, and it's unable to verbalize this or visualize this somehow. And it's that's really interesting. And I can just add to that we work a lot with this embodiment of the place, and like the exercise you were describing, we also do that. And it's really sometimes the patch that is we do it live in a group during our walks very often, and the space that we observe is we imagine it as a kind of cubic of space. And Žeželj, it's incredible because there's so much going on in each small cubic of space there. It's so intense and wild, and I think it's important that you kind of slow down your attention, and that the stories that are created, they are very subjective and they are very situated, and the knowledge that I take out of this exercise is completely different than the knowledge you take out, because we are just like different people, and we are a meter away, and I observe a different spider and you observe something some other situation going on. And I guess it's a lot about at the same time looking into the direction of embodiment and the tacit knowledge, but at the same time of scientific knowledge, and trying to not treat them as two different voices, but try to see how they overlap, and then the new spaces can be observed and explored. So I think, answering maybe more directly to Olga's question, I think the fact that the story told about a specific non-human actor or life or ecosystem, that it's a very multi-voiced narration, that it's not one story, but it's a story that has all those different kind of knowledges and different kinds of perspective, and also the known and the unknown, and data and feelings. And then it's never the whole story, but it allows to maybe be more close to the story of the non-humans that surround and create and live in that space. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Krisha. Anna, can we now jump to you?
Yeah, of course. I mostly agree with both of them. I don't think like we understand with the knowledge all life forms and connections, and we just have to use to the fact that maybe we don't know everything and we will ever know. But for me, it's like maybe through two completely different experience, I can kind of explain these different approaches to that. One is just through my hobby, like sailing. You know, once you're sailing, you have to work with it. It's very simple. You can't go against it. You have to really work with it if you want to survive, to feel the wind and to feel the sea. So it's very active, and it's very direct way of connecting with environment. Yeah, other ways, of course, to literature and the knowledge of the others, and maybe I could mention here another projects I did with the reading groups. So we start with the word of compost, like composting. And I explored these words to different fields. So I start with microbiology to urban architecture, to treating of the waste, to economies, etc. And I invite lots of different people from different fields who bring books and readings, so something to read, scientific or whatever. So in reading groups, we actually, through those experts, try to look on that topic from different lens, yeah, from micro scale to macro scale, yeah. And I must say that experience really changed my walking in the city, because after each session, I get new insight and all the environment looks completely different to me. Yeah, so I would agree there is a kind of more human way to approach it, knowledge, like through books and sharing those knowledge. And another would be maybe something which connects us to animal, you know, when you walk, when you breathe, when you hear, it's something which really very directly connects you. You can be aware of it, and maybe you are not aware of it, but it exists, you know. Once you get the flu, you understand that there is connection.
Yeah, that's great, and I actually love the, you know, the reference to sailing, because that's dealing with the most unpredictable weather forces, and just without sort of thinking, very intuitively having to follow it, not only observe and understand, but actually follow for survival.
Yeah, and you have to work with it, not against it, you know. You have to actually dance with it, and it's really, really amazing experience. So for me, maybe that's more direct way, but you know, you have to be on sailing.
Yeah, but I think that this can be, you know, taken and applied elsewhere, but yeah, it's a really vivid image now in my head. I wanted to now, sort of following, I guess this is still a continuation of the same question, but going a little bit deeper into storytelling and how you actually create some sort of mediation, some sort of, you know, let's say outcome for the work, something that is not necessarily experienced in the space that you within the space that you work with. And Krisha, I guess you already touched on that a little bit about the, multimodality or like the layeredness of the stories that are being told and the need for that, for this complexity to be created. But I guess my question, and this is a big question for myself, a big question for us as a group, as Zakole, how do you create a narrative? How do you tell a story that is about something that is so deeply rooted in a very specific environment? And should you do that, and can you do that, or is there rather a bigger need for creating a direct experience? So I wanted I would like to ask you to share a little bit, and maybe we can now start with Krisha, since you already touched on that. How do you approach it, and whether you struggle with it at all, because maybe some of you don't. I think that this is a question that comes from a personal interest, but we will go with it. So yeah, Krisha.
Yeah, well, we do struggle with this, and I think it's a big question for us, and it's an ongoing question. I mean, I think just in practical terms, we decided to that a website could be a platform that gathers the different layers of the story, so it can be non-hierarchical and dynamic. So I guess for us the website is the storytelling mediating platform, but and one of our collaborators during an interview told us that maybe Zakole is this kind of high mountain peak that you don't have to enter, but and you don't have to explore by yourself, but you know that it's a fantastic place, and you want to hear the story that is mediated. So even though for us the physical presence is so essential and so important, that even for the methods that we use in our group, we pinpoint that being there and carrying things around Zakole and eating there and sleeping there is the source of knowledge for us. That even though this is like the beginning of the story, I guess the storytelling part is very important, and again, I think it has to be this kind of layered sandwich of different languages and different stories and different kinds of knowledge, but also like visual, text wise, and in a way then each of us can grasp what's more close to our mindset, our heart, or our needs. Yeah, I don't know how, maybe you continue, because it's something that it's an open question for us, on and on, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that we experiment with all layers of it, because we still work and we introduce the people to this space as well, right? So so maybe it's a little bit of a compromise or trying to do it all. Either way, I think that there is a kind of like a spectrum of mediation and of and you have direct experience on one extreme, and the polar opposite would be like, I don't know, a film that we did or something like that. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Krisha. Anna, can we come back to you, and could you share with us a little bit about your storytelling?
About my personal storytelling, yeah, I don't know if I see it as a storytelling, but yeah, it's more visual, kind of expressing the things. I kind of thinking about it, how storytelling is always losing something in translation, which is kind of, you know, vague. But I think it's necessary because storytellers always pick up what's important for him in a way. So I think with this, what we talked in previous questions about how you actually shift and your focus and how you actually start to think about these other connections. When you do that, it will show up somehow in your storytelling. You don't need, I don't think you have to, you know, consciously thinking about that you want, you know, include that. It will just come out, you know, because your knowledge or your perception shift. Maybe a nice example is in one of those reading groups, I asked one really wonderful poet to bring up like poetry from different periods of history, which actually talk about connection to the nature and the dead. And when you took all those poems, which was from, let's say, 100 years, 100 years period, you can see in each poem how idea of nature was really changing. Like it's show up in those poems, what was the context and society, how society actually viewed that nature, you know. And I don't think that any of those poets consciously kind of tried to make those statements. But now, 100 years after, you kind of see it in it, you know. You see the difference. So yeah, for me, I'm kind of trying to do that consciously, you know. I just think the traces of it will happen in it if my focus was somewhere else, you know. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Tery, can we now jump to you? And I guess this is also a bit different since the scale that you work with, from what I understand, is very different. So, but yeah, but just the same question about how you approach mediation, or maybe how do you direct experiences of others? Yeah.
Yeah, I would add to all that you've all said. The thing that I am very inspired by the quote by Astrida Neymanis and Rachel Walker when they wrote that I don't know how it goes exactly, how we imagine the world affects kind of how we live with it. And in that sense, I find storytelling and also kind of like in words important and interesting, and also in connection to speculation. So how can we play with it and kind of change how we imagine the world, underline the porosity of the bodies? Yeah, maybe that. And now I remembered how Robin Wall Kimmerer was also writing how language kind of shows the idea how some languages have more nouns than verbs and other have more verbs than nouns. And I feel that it's reflecting a lot how we imagine the world. And in that sense, I'm interested in it. But yeah, of course, I do have a lot of questions about anthropomorphizing and power relationships, and how to then, like, how to include other perspectives verbally, like how to tell a story from a different perspective that's not mine.
Is it something that you have been trying to do, through text, like reflecting on those other perspectives? Can I ask, how did that go? Because that's always a tricky thing.
It's a super tricky thing. We were working on an audio walk with Maria Magdalena Kozłowska, and we were kind of like it was very verbal, but we were trying to induce a flirtatious mode with the landscape. And so the landscape was kind of inviting you to come into it. And I mean, it's very playful, but it's also sketchy, as you said. So I don't have a defined thought on the consequences of that.
But I like the notion of, you know, this flirtation. It's also like the landscape that is flirting or like inviting, but you're also flirting with you're just flirting with the idea of, you know, yeah, trying to create a story from a non-human perspective. So it's like, you know, tiptoeing around it, or like being quite careful around it, which I think is always just the most important thing, not to think or do in definite terms. Yeah, so, you know, on that note, I think we can now open, yeah, we're exactly on time actually, which I'm very glad about. We can now open the discussion, or, you know, floor to questions. So please, if anyone has something to comment or a question to ask, you can raise your hand or you can put it in the chat. But also I wanted to invite the three of you, maybe there is something that, you know, some more comments or questions to each other that you would like to, you know, something that you would like to address. Yeah. All right, well, I guess then maybe everything was just very clear. And, you know, I'm curious to now look into the works of the two of you. Krystyna's work I'm quite familiar with. And yeah, thank you so much for, you know, for being with us and for talking with all of us. Yeah, and, you know, I think that there is a couple of quite uplifting things that we've heard today. So yes, thank you so much, and have a good evening, everyone.